Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'm joined by an amazing entrepreneur today that has quite the accomplished career. But in true entrepreneurial fashion, I love how he identified an opportunity area, and now he serves people to reach the next level in their own journeys in life, in business, in their professional careers. Let me tell you about today's guest. His name is Chris Payne. After working 20 years as a marine scientist, Chris Payne founded Dirigo Science Connection with the goal of helping science professionals build their leadership skills and enhance relationships throughout the scientific community. Chris has worked from coast to coast, California to Florida to New England, ironically or coincidentally, all three of the places where I've lived, in the areas of marine science research, conservation, education, fisheries, and aquaculture. As a scientist, Chris knows the technical and research sides of the work are and should be the priority, but that consequently, the people operations often go overlooked. So after 2 decades honing his marine science expertise, he shifted his passion and earned a Master of Science in Leadership from good old Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, to focus on bringing professional development opportunities to science organizations. With a Bachelor of Science in Marine Biology from the University of New England, Chris brings a unique combination of skills, experience, and understanding to each client he works with. He currently lives back in New England in South Portland, Maine with his family. I'm so excited to learn from him and hear all of his perspectives today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Chris Payne. All right, Chris, I am so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here.
Heck yeah. So obviously I tease listeners just a little bit about all the cool things that you and I have in common geographically, but also your professional background. Take us beyond that bio. Who the heck is Chris? How did you start doing all these amazing things that you do today?
Yeah, that was quite the introduction. And I absolutely love meeting people from New England, especially Massachusetts. So my career as a marine biologist, something I've always wanted to do since I was 6, 7 years old. That's just that was the path I knew I was going to take growing up in New England and going up to Maine for vacations and really just falling in love with the ocean. And I was lucky enough to get my undergrad up here in Maine. And then I just kind of explored and tried to find, where, I was comfortable. And I started out in marine science education down in Florida. I've done a lot of diving. I eventually made my way back up to New England and then said, nope, I'm not done. I got to go out to California. I spent about 12 years out in California working for aquariums, doing some contracting work, some nonprofit work, and really just seeing as many different areas of marine science as I could. And until I realized that, I love all the science that I've done. I've done some really, really amazing stuff. I've worked with some cool people, some absolutely mind-blowing animals, life experiences that you can't even believe. But I really wanted to start shifting gears and helping my coworkers and some of the younger science, excited science staff that I've been working with and future scientists in a different perspective. And, I really love being in a leadership role, but I also take pride in helping other people excel in areas that maybe they wouldn't, want to, or challenges they may not take on. And so I decided as a father-to-be of a brand new baby and in my mid-30s that, it was time to go back to school and really see what this leadership stuff was all about. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. And so that's kind of got me to where I am now. And I eventually got the motivation and the confidence to build this company that I'm so proud of. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it grow over the next, 10, 20 years.
Heck yeah. I love that overview for so many reasons, Chris. First and foremost is that I love labels. I love seeing the way that other people view themselves. And for you, you are such an accomplished scientist in your field. It's something that a lot of people dream of as kids, but you actually lived that dream in your professional career. But somewhere along the way, and you're right, what an interesting inflection point is if you didn't have enough on your plate to be a dad soon, but then you also decided, let's go back to school. Let's start a business and become an entrepreneur. Walk us through that shift, because it's not just a decision. You actually took action on it and you service people with your own business these days. Talk to us about that transition.
Yeah, that was a scary transition. I started my graduate school in 2017 in October, and our daughter was born just a couple months after that, not even actually, about 6 weeks after that. So I was, when you get into grad school, especially when you're later on in your life, you're going to take that challenge on because it's something that you really love. It's not something that I was forced to do, like you do when you're in undergrad. It's something that you're very passionate about. And I had been put into a lot of leadership roles in the terms of leading and guiding my teammates, or even outside of work, leading large groups of volunteers, never at a level that was a management or above, but just having the responsibility of making sure that my teammates understand how prepared they are going into specific projects, or whether we're diving, making sure we're all safe and we understand the whole entire scope of the project. And I wanted to expand on that. And so I started, looking inward, because I'll tell you that moving from Massachusetts to California, there is definitely a lot to learn about communication there. Out here, we're very direct, we're straightforward. It's hey, how efficient can we be? I learned very quickly that that's not how everybody talks. And so I had a lot of growing and learning on my own that I needed to do in terms of my own professional development and leadership development, even though I've been in these leadership roles since college. And so I started taking my own coursework, and then I decided, I want to do this for real, and went back to grad school. And then after I graduated, I was all in, and I wanted to kind of start. I had no idea what I was doing. And so I started, kind of put my name out there on different websites, and, whether it's a consultant or doing presentations or stuff like that, and just really didn't get anywhere. And so that was probably back in 2019, and then COVID hit, and then obviously things changed, and I felt a little bit more momentum to try to gather the resources that I needed. And so, yeah, just about last year or so, I decided to go all in. My wife is such an amazing support system. She said, let's just do it. And I started Dirigo Science Connection as an LLC. I got a mentor from SCORE, which is an incredible program that offers mentorships for free. They have them here in Maine, but they have them all over the country. And so I worked with a business mentor to help me go through the steps of starting a business. She was very, same thing, like very intrigued, I guess I should say, about a marine biologist who's trying to do this leadership and science business. And it is quite the interesting, niche to fall into. And I was just talking to another scientist that I'm setting up a training program for. And I told her that I'm not the type of person that's ever going to just kind of fall into line as the rest of the people. I'm probably one of only a few marine biologists that have said, to further my career, I want to go back and get a master's in leadership instead of continuing to go and get a master's in whatever type of study I was working on. And I absolutely love it. Honestly, I truly like being able to help scientists succeed from an interpersonal standpoint, because it is so incredibly valuable to the overall programs that they're part of. And long term, it just helps science move faster. And so now I'm in this world where I'm just, reaching out to different scientists in different fields, and just trying to get my name out there just to see who and what and where this is going to take me.
Yeah, I love that overview, Chris, especially because your passion does show through so much in the way you talk about these things, which is true of so many of us entrepreneurs. We freaking love what we do. And I can totally relate to so many aspects of your story. Gosh, when I moved to LA in my mid to late 20s, I got called out so frequently for being a New Englander, because I will never stop saying wicked. So yeah, exactly. I relate to so many parts of your story. But what I really like is that so much of what you're talking about is that a lot of people like to focus on the practice as practitioners. If you are a physical therapist, you focus on physical therapy. If you're a scientist, you focus on the science, and it's sexy to talk about those things. But what I'm really hearing and seeing from you, and this is all about what your business is that there's other vehicles that can help you be better as a practitioner. And in your case, it's right on your website, dirigoscience.com, which we'll talk about at the end of today's episode. But I love it. Stronger leaders, stronger science. Leadership is that vehicle through which we can improve our scientists and our science that we actually practice. So talk to us about that marriage between the two of them and the intersection, because you're right, it's unique, but I also think it's incredibly powerful and important.
Absolutely. Science, as you said, is such a technical skill that as you move up the ranks, you've done that because you're probably the best in your field, whatever that field might be. And I saw a lot of that in the various aspects of marine science that I worked in, where a lot of my bosses, as nice as they were and as talented as they were in the field of marine science, weren't necessarily the best when it came to the management and the leadership side of it. And there are so many ways to integrate leadership into science without sacrificing the research and the technical skill set. And really, when you look at how, from my perspective, leadership is built on communication. Well, science is all about communication. So when you're walking into a room to try to describe this next research project and the roles and the expectations and the timelines and all of the goals, and you're collaborating with other departments, you're working within the community, you have publications that you need to share with other scientists, there's obviously a lot of stakeholders throughout the entire process, and communication is key. So when I go into a room to start training scientists on their leadership skill sets and how we can strengthen that, it's all about building that basis of communication and breaking that down, where I really emphasize open communication environments where it doesn't mean that you can just go in to a group and just start saying whatever you want. As a leader, if you have a group of people that you're working and you're overseeing a project on, you want to make sure that everybody within that group feels comfortable to speak up, that all of those ideas are safe, that all of those ideas are welcome. It doesn't mean that all of the ideas are going to be used or utilized. And as a leader, it's up to you to really be able to communicate the reasoning for the direction that you're going to be taking. It's also important when you're in that management or higher role, you need to understand and be comfortable with feedback. And I've worked with so many great scientists who are just uncomfortable with feedback. And that means, receiving feedback, but also providing it. And I feel like as a leader, as a manager in a role where you're trying to help inspire people and really help them grow and put them in a position to succeed, as their resource, you should be able to provide them with feedback. And if you're not comfortable doing that, I feel it's up to you to try to understand how you can grow from an interpersonal perspective in that area to really help strengthen yourself as a leader, but also strengthen your team. And so when you take different leadership skills and traits and aspects, like, being transparent, but having a level of accountability, establishing a level of trust, not just with your team, but with your coworkers, your collaborators, your stakeholders, in the public, these are all areas that are going to help science in the long run. It's going to help your retention rates. It's going to help your motivation. It creates opportunities for autonomy within the group. And it provides you to give your followers and your teammates an understanding of really how they fall into this whole entire big process and how valuable their role is, so that they know that what they're doing is really making a difference. I started working and studying emotional intelligence because when you go into a scientific process and you're taking on these big projects that are going to last months, and you're working with people that maybe you've never worked with before, and you're coming into situations that maybe you're uncomfortable, you need to have a better understanding of how you're going to react in those situations. And also being able to, be comfortable knowing where your role is in that whole entire group. So for me, I try to establish a safe environment where we have a diversity of ideas from a number of different people, so that just because I might be in charge of this particular project we're working on, it doesn't mean that that I am going to just say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. I don't want to hear anything. We're just going to go this method and we'll see what happens. That's the opposite of how I want my science leaders to approach these situations. I want them to sit back. I want them to listen. I always say that the loudest person is not necessarily the best leader. You know, it's the people that are listening to all the ideas, taking in that information, and then pushing it forward in the best and most efficient way that they can, and also providing people a chance to speak up and challenge themselves and just take on these roles that maybe they have never had before.
Yeah, Chris, gosh, I love that overview for so many reasons, but I'm going to make it clear. Part of what I love about talking to you and learning from you is that obviously your niche is science leaders, but where my brain goes, because I'm biased and my niche is entrepreneurship, is I'm just like, you could substitute all of this for business leaders, for entrepreneurs, because
Absolutely.
Your strong emphasis on communication, gosh, that is so true for all of us as business leaders. We need to communicate and lead our teams, our customers, our prospects, our stakeholders. If we have investors, that's a very important pool that we need to show up as a leader for. And Chris, hearing you talk about all of these things, I think it's important for all of us entrepreneurs to take on board. And I'm going to pick on your industry just a little bit for a second, because obviously we all have that stereotypical cliched view of what a scientist is. And we always picture the ones who are just, incredibly brilliant academics, but maybe not the most extroverted people on the planet. And I know firsthand, we get a lot of emails from listeners who may be introverts, and they say, well, Brian,
Yeah.
I can't show up on video. Obviously, I'm very extroverted. Everyone uses me as the example.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this isn't the only way. There's a million different shapes and sizes of leaders. Chris, talk to about some of those different leadership styles, because I would imagine that getting people out of their shells, whether they're an introvert, whether they're a total science geek, whatever it may be, what are those different styles? What do they look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love seeing introverts step up as leaders. And I know so many that are great leaders. And one thing I don't like to see necessarily is when people think that, introverts need all this extra training. They don't. They just need an opportunity to be brought into the conversation. I think opening up those safe spaces to speak is really important. And I wasn't always extroverted. Honestly, I didn't start opening up until I was probably 16, 17. And then I haven't stopped talking since. But, when you have people that are obviously not as comfortable speaking up, are not as comfortable as taking the lead, but they have phenomenal ideas. And if you're not going to reach out to them and help them come into this conversation to contribute, you're not going to know that those are there. And then, of course, you have the other side where you have people that are just loud and they want to just be involved and they're super enthusiastic. And sometimes you got to kind of rein them back just a little bit because, their ideas are awesome, but we need to also see what everybody else's ideas are, just to see if there's anything else out there that might help us move a little bit more efficiently. And taking in all the ideas is important, but it's also really valuable to understand, if you're the leader, to be able to communicate your decisions. And I always say, I'm going to listen to everything that you throw at me, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I can utilize those. And then you have to, as a leader, be able to make those decisions. A lot of people in the leadership community like to focus on one different type. Like, I'm a servant leader. I like transformational leadership. I'm very directorial. For me, you got to encompass every aspect of it, because when I look at adaptive leadership, it shows me in situational leadership. It shows how, as a leader, you can go into a situation, be facing something that you didn't see coming, or maybe you thought it might happen, but you weren't 100% sure. The people and the leaders in the science world that are able to evaluate, establish the resources that are there, the people, the funding, and act on it in real time and make those decisions, not necessarily where it's, an emotional decision, but you've evaluated what you can do with what you have and then move forward. So you have leaders all over in the science world. There are people that are obviously going to be go get them, people that are, kind of sitting back and they're going to do what they have been asked to do because they're a team player. Like I've always been, it's team forward for me 1,000% all the time. And so in the science world, one thing that I learned really, really early on that I still take with me is understanding the different personalities. And I know we've probably all taken personality assessments, and to an extent they're valuable. I think with those, it's understanding just that other people that you work with work in different manners. They approach things differently. They communicate things differently. They hear things differently. And just because you maybe have said something over and over again and you feel like you've communicated it as clear as day, they still may need to be checked in on. Whereas other people, I've worked with plenty of scientists where they come in, they tell you what to do, or they walk away and they don't check on you, and that's fine because, maybe they have that confidence that you know how to get it done. But when it comes to introverted or extroverted or really loud and enthusiastic, or maybe you're just there because you want to get the experience and you're helping out every single person. And I'll never forget one of my first bosses in the aquarium world who told me, I understand that you want to know every single thing. I understand that you would learn every single thing in this building if I let you, but I need you to really focus on what your job is and what your role is, and you really get good at that, and then you can expand on it. So you've got all these different personalities within the science world. You get a whole bunch of very strong-willed PhD, postgraduates working on a project, and every single one of them thinks that their idea is the best idea. And we sit in meetings, and you sit in meetings, and you sit in meetings, and nothing ever moves forward. And those are the people that I want to reach out to that say, hey, how can we strengthen these areas so that we're not constantly repeating ourselves and that we are able to move these projects forward a lot faster.
Yeah, Chris, I really like how when you talk about these things, what I'm constantly hearing from you is that leadership is not just about us as the leaders, but it really is that collaborative, that team environment. Listening is so at the core of so many of what you share, or so much of what you share with us. And I'm going to shout out, quick aside, that I think that you and I are firm believers in the team environment because growing up in Boston, that's the city of champions.
Yeah,
We've seen so many successful teams, and teams of all different shapes and sizes. The Tom Brady Patriots were drastically different from the David Ortiz and Manny Ramirez Red Sox. Different cultures, different personalities, different leadership styles across all of those. But what you're really pointing out and sharing with us here today is embodying all of those different ingredients and elements, which leads me to this next question. I'm so excited to see how you take this, but obviously so much of this is those soft skills, the listening, the confidence, the navigating tricky conversations. These are all soft skills that I'm sure critics would say, Chris, I wasn't born with your personality. I don't have that in me. But obviously all of these things are muscles, they're skills. How the heck do we go about learning these types of skills? You're a leadership expert. How do you guide people there?
Yeah, it's great because I wasn't born with these skills necessarily either. And, you always hear, oh, you're a born leader. It's like, no, man, I didn't start talking really until I was way older than I should have been. I was very quiet. I was super shy. I never liked to speak. I always thought anything that I said was going to be wrong. I was not the person that was going to, be openly vocal about my opinions until I realized, that, I can contribute from the team perspective. I was always the smallest kid growing up in Boston. It was always, hey, coach, I'll help you with whatever I can. And once I started learning these other different areas and being exposed to other people who had the confidence to take on a project or being put into situations where, hey, you got to step it up. This is your moment. I need you to really understand this particular situation and lead it forward. And for me, it was really just getting the opportunity to step into those roles. I remember when I was working as an intern on a boat in Portsmouth, and my job was to do public speaking. And at that time, I hadn't really done too much public speaking. I was after freshman year in college, definitely starting to come out of my shell, but I didn't do any public speaking professionally at that point. And so my boss, who I still think is one of the best leaders that I've ever had, she really emphasized a lot of life lessons that I take with me today, is just putting yourself out there and seeing what your strengths are and seeing where you're comfortable, and then when you find areas that you want to build on, taking that time and putting in the effort to do that. So I got put into a situation once where I was supposed to do this whole entire tour. I was not prepared. I honestly have never been as little prepared in any moment as I was in that situation. And I had to give all these stats and statistics and facts about the Portsmouth area, and I just wasn't ready to do it. And this guy that I worked with stepped up and he did it for me, and I was so embarrassed. And I've never let that happen again. I made sure that I worked my butt off. I prepared for it, and I made sure that every moment after that, I was ready to step into that role, because I knew that it was something that I liked to do. I just didn't know how to do it well yet. And I was given the opportunity from my coworkers and my boss to be put into these situations that did make me feel uncomfortable, but they also helped me become better at that. They gave me the resources, they gave me the tools, they took the time to listen and teach. And so as a leadership expert, I'm trying to come in and basically I want to know where your interests are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and we want to build on those, because I can talk all day and that's great, but you have to want to do it, right? There's a lot of people who don't think they're going to be getting put into these positions of leadership as a scientist. I remember thinking, like, I don't ever want that. I just want to do the work. I love the work. I want to be out on a boat. I want to be underwater. I just want to do all the cool stuff. I'm never going to be put into this. And then you get really good at your job, and then you get put into these roles. Well, guess what? When you get put into those roles, you don't understand that now you're the one that has to communicate and plan and delegate and really show that you're confident, and, you know, set your team up for success by preparing them with the resources that they need. And so for scientists out there that are not comfortable, I think I said it earlier, where it's about just putting people in a position to challenge themselves to grow, where this is a role that maybe you never would take on by yourself, because you personally might not have the confidence to do it. And I'm going to put you in that role, but I'm going to be there. I'm going to be right next to you. I'm going to be a resource. You know that you can trust me and come to me as a resource if you have any questions, if you feel uncomfortable, if you need to practice something. I've helped so many undergraduate students that had never done public speaking before, where it's all about just engaging with them in terms of one-on-one, where you're looking at the information they have that they want to present. They know it, they love it, they're passionate about it, but they don't know how to communicate it in a form where it's a conversation. And so you just help them, and you emphasize how much time it really takes to practice just going through these scripts over and over and over again until they realize they can do this. And once they get comfortable with the talking part, then it's just talking. Then they're talking about cool stuff like I am. Like, it's just being able to have that confidence and just taking the risk to step into roles that maybe you might not have ever done before, because you know that you can do the work that you're seeing other people do. You just haven't wanted to step into those roles. And as leaders, if you are in charge of a team, it is on you to recognize and evaluate the people around you and put people in the right places to succeed. There's so many different areas in science where people just get thrown into roles where maybe that's not their strong suit. Maybe they're stronger doing this part of the project or this part of the project instead. And as a leader, you need to recognize that. And instead of talking down to someone who maybe isn't great at one area, then help them out. Ask them what's frustrating them. Listen. It's all about active listening, as you said. You've got to be willing to listen and then make those changes with them to help them succeed and put them in that place where because it's just helping the team overall. And then once you build up that level of trust, then you all start to work really well together. And so if there are scientists that feel that they're not being heard, or their voices aren't getting loud enough, or maybe they're not being challenged, or they're just timid and they don't want to take on because because of the fear of failure, which I've had every single day for so long, because it's such an intimidating feeling to have. And then realizing that, well, what if I mess up? Is it really impacting that much And if you're put in the right position and set up properly, then it shouldn't have that huge of an impact. And it's really just something that you want to take on these roles that maybe you just never really would. And then that confidence is going to come with it. That was a really long answer.
No, Chris, I love it because I actually think societally we need to talk about this more frequently. You really slammed home that point for us here today, which is, of course, we're not comfortable being leaders until we've been a leader. And I think it's so important to call that out because in our own careers, if I'm an amazing scientist, well, I'm really great at my job. I'm really great at being a scientist. I've never led a team before. I've never created a culture. I've never done any of those things. So of course it doesn't feel natural to me yet because I haven't done it yet. So it's that the choice of words that you use, Chris, I'm going to give you a lot of credit for it because I think that it's such a powerful call out to how intentional and stepping into the risks are that you say we need to step into new positions. We've not done these things before. We have to make that choice and take that risk to step into those. So I really love that. Chris, I will say, there's got to be a podcast or a book in your future. There has to be, because
I hope so, man.
I could listen to you talk about these things all day long. And on that note, I always love asking guests at the end. I have no idea which direction guests are going to take this question in, but we talked about so many important things today, so many big topics, so many soft skills, so much about the actual fundamentals of leadership, whether you're a scientist or an entrepreneur or you're leading a team of any sort. With all of that in mind, Chris, knowing that we're being listened to by thousands of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in over 150 countries. What's your takeaway for them? What's your best piece of advice that you hope they walk away from here saying, gosh, Chris pushed me to think about or do this? What's that thing?
So that's great. I have a couple of, I guess mottos that I always really push. And this business, as my wife has just recently kind of pointed out to me, is the emphasis of this quote that I absolutely love from John Quincy Adams, which is patience and perseverance have a magical effect before which difficulties disappear and obstacles vanish. And it's something that I have kind of just always have in the back of my mind is you have to be patient. You got to just do the little things, just do a little bit each day in the right direction, and you'll keep moving forward. And that's a good Rocky quote there for you that honestly I live by. And just if you have a goal and you really know that it's what it's not even just about being a passion, it's about being a purpose, right? This is my purpose. I know it. I know that this is what I'm meant to do. I've known it for a long time and I just haven't had the confidence to put the pieces together. All of us have that purpose and that passion. Just be very patient, but persevere. Absolutely persevere. It's not going to be easy. You got to just do little things to keep moving forward. And eventually you're going to see that success fall in your lap. You're going to be on a really cool podcast with a really cool dude from Massachusetts. And you're going to see a lot of the positive things kind of just fall into place. And then the success is going to grow from there.
Yes, amen to all of that. Gosh, I so enjoy it. I love the bonus Rocky reference. It really shows, I think, Chris, that you and I grew up about 30 minutes from each other. Because
I know, seriously.
We reference the same things, and I absolutely love it. I think it's so applicable here, and you're right. I mean, when we keep doing the right inputs, these outputs are going to follow, and I think you're a living example of that. I think not only within your field of expertise, but also from an entrepreneurial perspective. I love the work that you're up to. With that in mind, I'm going to be waiting, Chris, for you to launch your podcast and publish your book. But Until you get there, listeners will be excited to follow along your business. So drop those links on us. Where can listeners go to learn more about you and all the great work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we have a website. It's dirigoscience.com. My wife helped design it. She's a professional at this, so I got to give her a shout out there. And Piper Leto, she helped design it as well. So go check out www.dirigoscience.com. I'm also on Instagram at dirigoscience, and I'm on LinkedIn a lot. Honestly, we've got a LinkedIn page at Dirigo Science as well for Dirigo Science Connection. I really want to, reach out to, as many scientists as I can. But as you said earlier, this doesn't limit itself to scientists. It's really something that I think a lot of people can can really benefit from. It's something I hope is going to grow. And so go check us out at Dear Go Science and Dear Go Science Connection.
Yes, listeners, you know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find all those links that Chris just mentioned. Scroll down wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. You'll find a link to deargoscience.com. You'll find that link down below, as well as a link to Chris's socials that he referenced, as well as a link to his personal LinkedIn. If you want to reach out and thank him and encourage him to publish that book or launch that podcast, because he has so many thoughts on leadership. Yes, for sure. So listeners, don't be shy in reaching out. It's always incredible to have great people and great entrepreneurs in your circle. You've heard how generous Chris has been here on the show today. So Chris, on behalf of myself and all the listeners, thank you so much for joining us here today on the show.
Thank you so much. This was great.